My daughter was 7 years old and she loved peanut butter sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares. She had a thing about that. Squares were wrong, she'd tell me, very seriously, like it was a matter of law. Triangles tasted better. I don't know why I'm starting there. Maybe because it was the last normal thing I remember about her. That little face scrunching up if I got it wrong. Her name is Piper. I need you to remember that, because everything I'm about to tell you happened to her, and she deserves to be more than just the child in someone else's story. I work construction management. I leave the house by 6 most mornings, sometimes earlier if there's a site inspection. My wife, her name is Donna. She's always been the one who handled the mornings. School drop-off, breakfast, appointments. I never questioned it. I just trusted her. That's what you do when you've been married 11 years. You divide the world in half and you trust the other person with their half. I came home early on a Thursday in November. That doesn't sound like the beginning of anything. People come home early all the time. I had a migraine that started behind my left eye around noon and turned into something I couldn't push through by 2 o'clock. My site supervisor told me to go. I drove home with my sunglasses on and the radio off, and I thought about nothing except getting horizontal in a dark room. Donna's car was in the driveway, which was strange. She told me that morning she had errands to run, a hair appointment, lunch with her sister. I figured plans changed. I didn't think anything of it. The house was quiet when I came in through the side door. I set my keys on the counter. I drank a glass of water standing at the sink. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard it, a tapping sound, not scratching, not the skittering sound you associate with mice. A deliberate tap-tap coming from somewhere behind the drywall in the upstairs hallway. Rhythmic, patient, like something or someone was trying to get a message through. I stood on the stairs and I listened. It stopped. I told myself it was the pipes. Old houses settle, expand, contract with the cold. Our house wasn't old. We'd built it 7 years ago on a lot outside Murfreesboro, Tennessee. But I told myself pipes anyway, because that's easier than the alternative. Then it started again. Tap, tap, tap. I walked to the end of the hallway. The sound was coming from near the linen closet, the wall beside it, specifically. I pressed my hand flat against the drywall. It was cold. Slightly cold, in a way that felt wrong for an interior wall. I stood there with my palm on the wall and I listened, and then I heard something that I have never been able to unhear in 4 years. A small voice, barely audible, saying my name, Daddy. My vision went white. That's the only way I can describe it. The migraine, which had been a dull pressure behind my eye, suddenly meant nothing. I was completely awake. I pressed my ear against the wall. Piper? Piper, can you hear me? A pause. Then, Daddy, I'm scared. I did not stop to think. I went to the garage and I got the hammer off my workbench. I came back upstairs and I put the claw end into the drywall just to the left of the linen closet and I pulled. Drywall compound crumbled. I pulled again and a section broke away and I shone my phone flashlight into the gap. She was sitting on a cross beam between 2 studs, about 2 feet deep, her knees pulled to her chest. She had a thin blanket wrapped around her and her school backpack in her lap. Her eyes were red. She had been crying for a long time. There was a water bottle wedged beside her, half empty, and a small bag of crackers which told me with horrible clarity that this was not an accident. Someone had put her there. Someone had planned it. I reached in and I pulled her out. She was shaking. I held her against my chest and I kept saying, I've got you, while she cried without making any sound, which is the worst kind of crying. The kind that comes after a child has been afraid long enough that they've stopped expecting anyone to hear. I carried her to the bedroom and I sat on the edge of the bed. I held her face in both hands. I looked at her eyes. Who did this? She didn't answer right away. She was still shaking. I got her the sweatshirt off the back of the chair and I wrapped it around her. Piper, I need you to tell me. She said if I made noise you would be angry at me, she said. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Who said that? My daughter looked at the door. "Where's Mama?" she asked. Donna was not in the house. Her car was still in the driveway, but she was not inside. I called her phone 3 times and it went to voicemail. I sat on the bed with Piper on my lap and I tried to think clearly and I could not. My daughter had been in the wall. In the wall. In our house. The house I built. The house I worked 70-hour weeks to pay for. The house where I thought she was safe every single day. I called 911. The dispatcher was calm in that trained way that somehow helps. She kept me talking while she sent a unit. I told her I found my daughter in the wall cavity of my home. There was a silence on the line that I will never forget, just a half second where even she, who had heard everything, didn't have a prepared response for that. 2 officers arrived within 12 minutes. A woman named Officer Strickland and a younger man who introduced himself as Officer Beale. They were good. They were kind to Piper. Officer Strickland sat with her on the bed and showed her pictures of her own dog on her phone, while Officer Beale walked me through what I'd found. "Is this the first time this has happened?" he asked. I said I didn't know. I said I thought so. I said I was at work every day and my wife was home with her and I didn't. I couldn't. He wrote something down. "Where is your wife now?" I didn't know that either. An investigator arrived within the hour. His name was Aldridge, a heavy-set man in his 50s, with reading glasses he kept taking on and off. He asked me to walk him through the wall cavity setup. When I showed him the size of the space, where the blanket had been, the water bottle, the crackers, he didn't react outwardly, but he took a lot of photographs, more than I expected. "She's been in there before," he said. Not a question. I said I didn't understand. The way the blanket's folded, the way the crackers are positioned. This is a routine. Someone taught her where to sit, how to be quiet. He paused. "How long have you and your wife lived in this house?" 7 years, I told him. He nodded and wrote something down. "We're going to need to look at some other areas of the structure," he said. "The basement, the crawl space. Would you consent to that?" I said yes. "Of course, yes." They found a box in the crawl space. I wasn't there when they opened it. Aldridge had asked me to stay upstairs with Piper, and I'm grateful for that now, though I didn't understand why at the time. I heard voices below me, a muffled exchange, then silence, then more voices. Aldridge came upstairs about 40 minutes later, and he asked me to sit down. He told me that inside the box, a large plastic storage container, sealed, pushed to the far corner of the crawl space beneath the east side of the house. They had found documentation, letters, photographs, a journal, printed records. He told me the journal belonged to a woman named Loretta. I had never heard that name in my life. Aldridge explained it carefully, the way investigators do when they're managing the pace of information because they know it will break something in you. "Loretta," he said, "was someone my wife had met 3 years ago through a church group. Not our church. A different one in a town about 40 miles east. Donna had been driving there on Sundays while I worked weekends. I hadn't known she'd found a new church. I thought she slept in." The journal described a relationship, a plan. Loretta believed, based on what appeared to be some kind of shared ideology that Aldridge described to me as extreme disciplinarian, that children needed to be broken of willfulness the way you break a horse. The journal detailed methods. The box contained photographs. Some of the photographs were of Piper. I don't want to describe those photographs. I will say only that my daughter had been treated as a subject in someone else's belief system. That what was done to her was not done in anger. It was done deliberately, methodically, with a twisted conviction that it was right. That is somehow worse. Donna was located at a motel off Interstate 24 about 60 miles from our house. She had checked in the night before. The investigators believed she knew I was coming home early. I'd sent a text to the house phone line, the old landline, at 1:30 saying I had a migraine, and she panicked, left Piper in the wall, drove away. She did not call anyone to let Piper out. She drove away and checked into a motel, and she was watching television when they knocked on the door. I have been asked many times how I felt when I learned that. People want a clean emotion. Rage, they assume, or grief. What I actually felt was a kind of dislocation, like the ground had been pulled out from under a house I thought was solid. 11 years. Every dinner, every vacation, every ordinary Tuesday. I was married to someone I did not know. There is more I could tell you about the investigation, and I will, but I want to stop here for a moment because there is something you need to understand about the weeks that followed, and it's the part that nobody talks about when these stories get told in short form. Piper didn't tell me right away. Not everything. It came out slowly, over months of therapy with a specialist in Nashville. Fragments. Thursdays were bad days. She was afraid of closets for a long time. She wouldn't eat crackers for nearly a year. The therapist told me that children don't always scream or fight or run when something is wrong. They adapt. They find ways to survive within the situation they're in. Piper had learned that noise meant consequences, so she stopped making noise. She'd been in that wall, or variations of that wall, for portions of the day for the therapist estimated, at least 18 months. 18 months. She was 7. That means it started when she was 5. I had driven away every morning at 6 and I had not known. That guilt doesn't go away. I want to be honest with you about that because I think it's important. People said to me, "You couldn't have known," and they meant it kindly, and they were probably right, and it did not matter. The guilt is not rational. It lives in the part of you that is purely animal, purely parent, and it says, "You are the reason she was safe, and you failed." And that is simply true regardless of what you knew. My therapist has helped me carry that. I want you to know I have a therapist now. 2 years of weekly sessions. I'm telling you, because I think men in their 40s who grew up being told to push through things need to hear that it's not weakness. It's survival. Donna was charged with child endangerment, child abuse, and criminal confinement. Her attorney tried to argue that the practices were religious in nature and constitutionally protected. The judge made clear, in language I can only describe as appropriately furious, that no religious framework grants a parent the right to confine a child in a wall cavity. Donna was sentenced to 14 years. She will be eligible for parole consideration in 9. Loretta was charged separately. She had her own history, which came out during discovery. There had been 2 prior Child Protective Services reports in another county, both deemed inconclusive. Investigators believe she had been practicing these methods for years before she met Donna. She is currently serving 22 years. I have full custody of Piper. She is 11 now. She is doing well, in the way that means she is alive and still curious about the world, and has friends she texts too much, and opinions about music I don't understand. She got a rescue dog last spring, a hound mix she named Biscuit after what I assume is some kind of negotiation with the universe. She still sees her therapist every other week. She probably will for a long time. That's okay. That's what we do. She asked me once, about a year ago, whether she was going to be okay. We were in the kitchen. I was cutting her a peanut butter sandwich into triangles because some things don't change. I told her I didn't know everything about the future, but I knew she was one of the bravest people I'd ever met. She'd tapped on that wall. She'd kept tapping even when she didn't know if anyone was coming. That was her. That was all her. She thought about that for a second. "I heard your car," she said. "I recognized the sound of the engine." I had to turn around so she didn't see my face. She knew it was me. She'd been listening for me, maybe every day, maybe for longer than I can bring myself to count. She had been listening for the sound of my engine in the driveway, and when she finally heard it, she tapped. I got to her in time because she never stopped believing I would come. I think about the parents who don't come home early, the ones who never hear the tapping, the children who eventually stop. That thought lives in me like a splinter that can't be removed, and I think it's supposed to. I think that's the point. We are supposed to feel it because the feeling is what makes us look, what makes us ask, what makes us refuse to let "it's fine" be good enough when something in us says it isn't. If you have a child in your life who has gone quiet, who flinches at things they shouldn't, who seems smaller somehow than they used to be, Don't look away from that. Don't let anyone explain it away. Ask. Stay. Listen. Piper tapped on the wall with her knuckles because her hands were free, and she was 7 years old, and she still believed her father would hear her. Be the person who hears. I keep coming back to the crackers. That small bag of crackers tucked beside her in the wall cavity. Someone had put them there, thought ahead, packed a snack for a child they were about to confine in darkness. That detail tells you everything you need to know about how a person can convince themselves that what they're doing is care. Donna didn't think she was a monster. I believe that now, as much as it costs me to say it. She had built a story in her head, about discipline, about strength, about what children need, and the story was so complete, so internally consistent, that she could pack crackers and feel like a good mother. That's the thing about moral failure that nobody warns you about. It rarely looks like evil from the inside. It looks like conviction. What I've had to sit with in 4 years of therapy and 4 years of putting one foot in front of the other is the question of what I missed, not what Donna did. What I didn't see. I was a man who prided himself on being practical, on reading a job site, on knowing when a foundation was off. I could look at a structure and tell you where the stress fractures were going to form before they formed. And I came home every night to a house where my daughter was being broken apart, and I did not see it. I've had to be honest with myself about why. The truth is that I let the division of our life feel like a wall I wasn't supposed to cross. Her half, my half. I brought home the money. She handled the rest. That felt like partnership. What it actually was, I understand now, was abdication. I outsourced the most important thing I had, my daughter's daily life, and called it trust. Piper's resilience is not something I can take credit for. She built that herself, in the dark, over 18 months, by deciding every single day to keep listening for the sound of my engine. That is not something anyone taught her. It came from somewhere inside her that the darkness could not reach. She had the kind of inner toughness that doesn't announce itself. It just quietly refuses to quit. I look at her now, at 11, opinionated and loud and completely unbothered by things that used to make her flinch. And I think she figured out how to survive before I figured out there was anything to survive. What I want to say to you, and I mean this without any performance, just as plainly as I can, is that the children in your life are paying attention to things you don't know they're paying attention to. They are smarter than the frameworks we build around them. They notice the tone of voice, the locked door, the explanation that comes a half-second too fast. They notice. What they need is one adult who notices back. The consequences in this story were not random. Donna made 100 small choices that led to a locked crawl space. I made 100 small choices that led to not looking. And Piper made one small choice over and over that led to her still being here. She tapped. She used the only tool she had. She did the right thing with what she was given, even when what she was given was almost nothing. That's what I think about when things get heavy. Not the box, not the photographs, not the 40 grams your sins. I think about a 7-year-old girl pressing her knuckles against drywall in the dark, listening for an engine, deciding one more time to try. Be someone worth tapping for.